in Spring Grove, Giants in the Earth, is assigned in high school anymore.
It's not.
And I was quite taken by it, and I was even quite taken by the comment that the brightest girl in the class made about the white walls in Giants in the Earth. And she said, well, that's some sort of symbolism about Barrett, the main character's sex life. I thought, white walls and sex. This is a brand new way of reading a book. And it had never occurred to me, that novels could be communicating on symbolic levels. And it was a real jump starter for me. I eventually developed quite an interest in Rovag. And I read just about everything he's written. And that seems odd that I would do that without even knowing you exist. I think in part it's because my parents were immigrants. They were Italian immigrants. They came from a small village in the south of Italy, and I grew up, in a sense, bilingually and biculturally, and the old world was always very interesting to me, and I always felt that it was present in a way. It was part of who I was, in part because I grew up knowing Italian. I heard Italian spoken, I heard the old country spoken a lot. Eventually, I ended up writing about Rovag. And here's an off-print of an article I wrote called The Great Plain, Rovag's New World Sea. And I'd be happy to leave that here if you have any use for it. And it's one of the few scholarly things that I've ever written. I did get a PhD in English from Ohio State after attending a small liberal arts college in Michigan. I came to Winona State in 1969, which is probably a little before you were born. And taught there for 33 years. So I've been teaching really for 39 years. And came out of that PhD with essentially a scholar's credentials. And through all my 6 years of graduate school, really, I think I wrote maybe 2 poems and no short stories. So the creative part of me was certainly slumbering, lurking in the darkness. And I did write a few scholarly things, and this is one of them. And here it is. It's in a book called Literature and Lore of the Sea. And that's an off-print from that book. Mm-hmm. So,
is the entire book your work?
I have 3 pieces in it. I have a piece by Melville, I have a piece by Poe, and I have a piece by Rovag in that book. But it's a compilation of several scholarly monographs, essentially. I think I taught one of the first classes I ever taught in Spring Grove in 1970. It was a sort of an extension class, and I did it for money. And I think there were 8 or 10 people in the class, and I'm not sure where I taught it. I think it was in one of the schools here. And then got connected rather loosely with the gallery. My books, I think, some of them are still in there. I brought some of them along if you want to look at them. But anyway, as I started teaching at Winona State, I discovered a narrative, in a sense, and how narrative was important to me. The need to tell a story. And again, to complicate my confusion about being here tonight, I was in Iowa City just a few hours ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I guess you're from there?
I'm familiar with that drive. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been there since, or we were there since 1997. We sold our house this year down there, so we're completely moved up.
And my daughter is a student there. And,
Okay.
She plays in the Iowa Symphony Band, so we went for her concert there last night, and I drove all the way to Winona and turned around and came back here. I could almost smell you down there at Mabel. You know.
Yeah.
I thought, well, got to drop the wife off and pet the dog.
You've been on the road. What does your daughter play?
She plays French horn.
Oh,
Yeah,
great instrument.
yeah, it is.
I might mention that one of the women who works here, Katie Wisty, has read some of your works online. Some of your writings, apparently, they're online. And she is an Italian major, so she's writing her thesis right now in Italian, but she also works here 20 hours a week. So it's too bad she couldn't be here. She might have. Well, then you would probably be speaking in Italian right now, and we would be lost.
We're from Italy.
She's lived over there for a year now too.
She's learning to make goat cheese over there.
Oh yeah, and she's my source of goat milk and goat cheese, and so she makes all sorts of unique, different types of cheeses.
She's at the University of Minnesota.
Yeah, but she's just finishing up her thesis, I think. So that's the only
She's a
class.
farm girl from 4 miles north.
Right, she is. Yeah.
So, and I was curious when you were talking about your heritage, did you and your parents then travel back to Italy a few times while you were growing up?
My parents went back, but without me. They went back a few times, and one of the issues was always America yes or America no.
Meaning, how much do you assimilate, or?
I mean, I often, as a child, heard, "I'm going back to Italy," because this is not for me. That talk stopped in the mid-50s. Then it really turned as my parents went back to Italy, and then they became defenders of the United States, of living here. But of course, they also had sort of cashed in, on the opportunities that the 50s offered, the post-war boom and all of that.
Living in Michigan?
They had both passed away. They were in Michigan at the time, yes. And my dad made it almost to 99, and my mother to 89. Yeah.
Wow, you're going to live forever.
Oh, I heard about that. Pretty creaky. Let me just show you some of the books. This is actually a play based on the Winona legends. My wife wrote her master's thesis based on the legends of the so-called Princess Winona who leaped from the rock and all that. There are about 50 different versions, and she is the world's expert on the Winona legends, and I sort of tried to synthesize the legends into a play. And the play is
This is the play then?
This is the play with her introduction to the play.
Has that been performed?
It has been performed. It was performed in Winona. It was professionally performed. And I've written, 4 other plays, and including one based on Giants in the Earth, believe it or not. Isn't this odd?
Yeah.
It is.
I've got a dramatic version of Giants in the Earth. It was the first play I ever wrote. My wife and I also co-edited this.
Yes, that one's at the gallery.
That's probably at the gallery. And we co-edited this.
Yes, and that one's up there too.
Yep. This is a sort of Italian-American novel, and this is me in an earlier incarnation.
That's fun to see. What's the body of water?
The body of water is Lake Michigan, actually. I'd like people to think it's the Mediterranean, but it's This is my first book. It's It's called Enemy Country, and it's got my very first short story in it, which was inspired by just the need to speak out, I guess. I was so upset about the Vietnam War that in the middle of the night I woke up and I went to Lake Winona and looked at the black water out there, and I jumped in and swam across and back. And no sane person would probably do that. And then I went home and I started writing my first short story. And that was published by a small journal called the North Country Anvil, which maybe some of you have seen. And I thought, well, I'm just going to keep writing. And so I wrote a whole bunch more stories, and the ones that have to do with Vietnam come together here, and that's my first little book. This is a collection of essays, and my immigrant roots are evident in the title. The main piece in here is called Burying the Tree, and it's I have a fig tree in my backyard, and it's probably Minnesota's only fig tree.
Is it a Turkish fig?
It's an Italian fig.
An Italian fig.
It's from a sprig that was brought over from Italy.
No kidding.
By my parents. Yeah.
So have you tried to take cuttings from that and plant another?
I don't need to. I had a cutting and it took.
But don't you want to continue with the planting?
Others are welcome to come and take cuts if they want to do the work to keep it alive during the winter.
I bet.
Do you have to wrap it?
I have to bury it.
Only bury it, like tree roses.
But this is essays. And this has to do with Italy. This is a memoir, pieces that I wrote over the years, again, immigrant related. Pieces about being American, being Italian, being Italo-American, going back to Italy, to the little village. And this is not actually the village. The village is really a lot smaller than this.
And did you say that was in southern Italy?
Yes, it's in the deep south of Italy, which northern Italian is considered to be part of Africa. And this is a collection of short stories, and I won a little award for this, a Minnesota Book Award for this one.
When was that published?
95, I think. And this is my first novel, Billy Brazil. Okay. Now these are all small press publications. I am not a commercial writer. I have never been able to make it as a commercial writer. Okay. Noden Press is about as big as I get, and that's a Minneapolis publisher who's done these. And actually, New Rivers is comparable. But I'm really small potatoes, you know.
But prolific.
Yeah.
You have a lot to say.
Yeah. Well, I write. You know, I make a discipline of it. Process. Find your 2 hours every day.
Yeah. Do you write better at morning?
Very fortunate in that when you hang around a university long enough, you begin to have the opportunity to make your own schedule. Process. There are writers, and then there are people who write. Writers think they write and go around calling themselves writers, and then there are people who write. And they stare at a lot of blank pages, and they have to endure at times their own very boring lives. And you think about writers like Hemingway, who went out there and killed, I don't know, probably the first anti-ecological. I mean, the guy killed everything in sight, right? He had this wild life, and killing beasts of one sort or other. But there were a lot of hours when he just sat there at the table, and actually probably wrote with a pair of scissors because he was probably cutting a lot, which comes back to your problem. So process, I think, has in part to do with commitment. Deciding at a certain point in your life whether this is really how you want to spend your life. And it's going to be a pretty sedentary experience unless you complement it with other activities. For me, I consider myself extremely fortunate, not necessarily hardworking, but extremely fortunate to have been born at the right time, in the right place. And the right place in my case was 3 city blocks. I was born in Dearborn, Michigan, 3 blocks from the border of Detroit, Michigan. And the difference between those 3 blocks was the difference between white and black. And the difference between a really nice school and really crappy schools. And 3 blocks, and it's just an accident of birth, in a way. That really nice school had some very nice English teachers who said, gee, maybe you should go to college, which is maybe an offer that the kids on the other side of Tyerman Avenue were never asked. And I went to college, and college led to grad school, and road leads on to road, and crazy decisions that are made very early in life become very important. Go home and read the Robert Frost poem, The Road Not Taken, and remember that poem is about the road not taken. Okay? Remember that every time you think about some hot guy you want to marry, how you might be able to do better. So anyway, there's a certain Pavlovian, the biologist here I think knows what I'm talking about. Pavlov's dogs, they would salivate, ring the bell, etc. I suppose, when I got the first story published, even in this tiny little radical magazine, and in a lot of ways it's a very embarrassing story, you salivate, you want more. Then you want a second story. You get your first book and you want a second. I'm dealing with my 16-year-old who's a pretty good athlete, but he has less interest in basketball than I do. In part, I think because I tried to hook him too early, and this is for the fathers. He's this tall, and he has to throw this big pumpkin up to a hoop 10 feet high, and it comes back and hits him in the face. And he says, why the hell do I want to do this the rest of my life? Do it, kid, or die. But then, if he makes one, then the salivation impulse kicks in. And writing is really hard to generate. It's hard to generate saliva out of writing. And in journalism, you're really going to find this to be true, because journalism is really changing dramatically. It's really hard to make money in writing. Anything. You hear about the mega, the bestsellers and all the rest of that. A lot of it's hokum. because the books that are on the bestseller list make it into the door of Barnes & Noble because Barnes & Noble has bought them. But guess what? Barnes & Noble doesn't necessarily sell them. So they're on the bestseller list, but nobody's reading them. And yes, those contracts are often lucrative, particularly for the airport books, bestsellers in the airports and so on. But most writers don't make a dime. And I think I'm in that category.